Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 40 here at the Tavern, presented by Hirotaku.com. Well, guys, it has finally happened. I have watched every single episode of Go Buster. So I finished the final episode a couple of nights ago, and I just saw the Go Buster versus Go Buster movie, the Go Kaiger versus Go Buster movie as well. I've watched all the stuff. There are a couple things I couldn't get my hands on, such as some of the DVD specials. But needless to say, I've seen the entire series. I've thought about it for a while, and I'm going to go ahead and give you guys, just my overall thoughts of what I thought of Go Busters, how good was the series, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it. And I'm just going to kind of, ramble on as I usually do. I will make this kind of warning before I go ahead and start, since I do have the 15-minute limit on YouTube at the moment. I'm not going to be just sitting here counting down the minutes and going to another video. So I'm just going to record this as one long audio file, and then I will split it up into segments. So I apologize for that, but it's just going to be easier for me this way. That way I don't have to keep timing myself and losing my thoughts and things like that. So I hope you guys can understand, and we'll go from there. One of these days this limit will be lifted, and we will no longer have these multi-parters. So in any case, let's go ahead and talk about the series as a whole. The first thing I want to go ahead and address is, I think overall I did like it. It was very different from a lot of the Sentai series, and I knew that going in. Going into it, I was told it was very different in its aesthetic look, the way the plot had moved around, the way it works in its characters. It was less goofy, a lot more serious-minded. It took itself more serious. Things were a little bit more realistic. Those were the things that I kind of knew going into the series. And a lot of people didn't like this show because of those factors, because of the fact that it was too dark, it was too serious, it wasn't as lighthearted and stuff. And I'll address those issues here in a moment, but first, hearing about that from people saying that it's too dark and that's why I don't like it, that made me want to watch it all the more, because I was really interested in a darker, more serious type of Sentai. Because, the way the Sentai world works, there is room for the Adam West version, and there's room for the Christopher Nolan version, if you get my meaning. There's room for all those, but we need to see more of the more serious toned ones, even though the comedy series are a bit more popular. I think we as Americans do like the darker version than we like the comedic, as opposed to the Japanese audience, because it does seem the Japanese audience responds well to the more comedic series than they typically do the more serious-minded ones. That's just a general thought on my part. I could be wrong on that, but I do tend to see, like, Car Ranger was very popular, Go Onger was very popular, Q Ryuger is really popular right now. And again, what these series have in common, they're all comedic, more lighthearted in tone than, your Go Buster, your Shinkanger, O Ranger to an extent, which, again, I know almost ended the franchise, basically. But I was really looking forward to a darker type series, something that was a little bit more serious. And for the most part, I think it delivered. So, for those of you who haven't seen it, there are going to be some spoilers ahead. I do apologize for that. But definitely go watch it. I know it's 50 episodes and a couple of movies and all that, but it's worth it. And I want to make sure that everybody here, I don't spoil anything for everybody, and everybody knows what I'm talking about. And not to mention, I will say, I didn't watch it all in a row, and I'm not going to remember certain things because of my memory, so I apologize for that in advance as well. But basically, the story is pretty straightforward, pretty simple, actually, when you think about it. The three Go Busters, they're being recruited to fight against a computer virus that's going to go ahead and take over the world if not kept in check, and these three kids have to go ahead and stop them, basically, because they are the prodigies of those who basically created him. Now, the first thing off the bat, and I know it's a very simplistic analysis of it, but when I first saw this is like Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad. No joke, because Messiah and Enter remind me of Kilo Khan and Malcolm Frank. It was like just deja vu in a way. It was almost the same kind of thing. A computer virus is manipulating somebody in the real world to go ahead and do these things to free him or make him conquer, take over, and all that. And I'm like, did Super Sentai just rip off a Power Rangers ripoff, which in Power Rangers is technically a ripoff of Sentai? My mind just kind of was blown at that concept. Um, but yeah, it's a lot more in depth than I had just previously stated. I mean, obviously, what's going on here is that the computer virus wants to go ahead and take over the world, not in like Vengeance, in RPM and all that. Wants to reformat the world to an environment that's suitable for him. In order to do that, he needs to get the Intron, which is their new alternative fuel source that everything kind of works on and all that. So that's kind of like the basic premise and all that. And the reason that the Rangers are chosen is that you have the people who created them, basically, their whole research facility was teleported into the subdivision where he lives. They were able to save their children, but at the risk of basically transforming their bodies, allowing them to be not so much computer hybrids, but have the flaws of computers, such as overheating and so forth, affected viruses, visual imagery, but also have enhanced skills, such as the Red Ranger can have super speed, Yellow Ranger can jump really high, and the Blue Ranger has super strength, which is a pretty cool setup. It is kind of that, it's my destiny to do this kind of thing. It's really kind of played up with the Red Ranger at the beginning. It's like, I want to be here. This is for my parents' legacy. Because, their parents disappear, in the backstory that we learn that they've been orphaned, basically, because of this, and they've been taken in by the energy center, and I forget its name at the moment. And basically, two of them are raised with the energy center, become agents, and basically, just being trained to fight this guy should he ever come back, basically. So let's go ahead and talk about the characters a little bit. First of all, the Red Ranger, and I'm gonna botch these names, I just know it, but Hiromu. I'm just gonna call him the Red Buster. So Red Buster is your typical Red Ranger protagonist. He is the rookie Red Ranger of the season 2, because the other two Rangers had been training a little bit longer and all that. And the Red Ranger, he's cocky, he's young, but he's also very determined and driven. Not unlike Cole, I would say, because here's the thing. He's wanting to avenge his parents, but he also wants to find his parents, because he's under the belief that they are still alive out there somewhere for him to find. And I like that about him. I think it's good to give him a goal, a tangible goal, basically. And to find your parents, is definitely a goal. I mean, this is something they didn't necessarily give the other two Rangers. I mean, yeah, their families were affected as well, but the Yellow Ranger, she doesn't. Let me get to the Yellow Ranger here in a minute. But basically, the whole thing about the Red Rangers, that's his drive throughout the series. That's why he does what he does. That's why he's a little bit reckless at times, because it seems to me that he had been stricken so much by grief. That it's led him to do these things. And I like that. I think that's very interesting for the Red Ranger. He's really a static character throughout the series, because he's not really the jerk. He doesn't have anything to learn. He doesn't have anything to grow, really, other than to let go. And that's something that they all have to learn later on, and I'll get to that point. But that's all he really has to go ahead and learn how to let go. Which is a very powerful lesson, I think, and a very powerful episode. And again, I'll do ahead and talk about that. But, he's really just a standard, generic fare. Nothing really too special about him, but also nothing really offensive. Nothing that really bothers me about him. He was a good choice. I think he was okay. And, let's move on to Ryuji, the Blue Ranger. This guy was also kind of generic as well. He is the older one because Yellow Ranger's youngest, Blue Ranger's oldest. I think he's supposed to be 28, 29, around that age, almost 30. So he is the more serious minded. He is the more responsible of the characters. I do like that. That it's not always the leader who's minded. It's not so much like he pulls the Red Ranger back, but he is the common sense. He is kind of the I don't know. I mean, something of the Spock of the group in a way. I guess I would say. What I really like about his character is he has the same resolve as the Red Ranger, but if I recall correctly, I don't think any of his family was directly affected. Like, he didn't lose his parents like the Red Yellow Ranger did, but he did lose somebody. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I apologize for that. Um, but what I like is, okay, so his big thing is he has a super strength. But when he gets overheated, he goes on a rampage. He loses complete control of his emotions and his inhibitions and just rampages like crazy. It's almost like akin to the Hulk, basically. And it's really awesome. I love the scenes where he does go berserk. There is an episode in the latter half of the series where he and the Yellow Ranger were having an argument with one another, and then he just kind of like lost it in battle and was attacking her, and she had to try to bring him out of it. And that's the thing, you can't bring him out of it. That's his thing. He's like, once he goes on rampage, he has to cool down. He has to be cold somehow in order to be himself again. You can't talk with him. You can't reason with him. And I like that because what they're trying to do with, like, and again, using that Hulk analogy, is like try to get to his heart, to get to the person. You can't do that with this character. And I like that because there is going to be that point of no return a lot of times. Things aren't going to turn out as nicely as you think and all that. And that's what I like about the series because it does make that statement, I think, is that things aren't always going to be as nice as you would hope they would be. Not everything's going to turn out perfectly. And that's rather consistent throughout the series, and I like this about this character. Is like, it's not going to turn out perfectly. You are going to have to do this. You can't reason with him. So, but yeah, he's kind of generic as well. And that's the thing I will say about these Rangers is that for the most part, there you could almost interchange them with other personalities. I mean, what they did in Kyoryuger's, I think they made a better attempt to give the Rangers distinct personalities. And that may have been a direct result from this. And even the season before Go Buster, the characters are a little bit more distinct. I would say in the case of the Red and Blue Ranger, they are a little bit more stock than the other characters in the show. Which isn't to say anything is wrong with them. It's just that when you think you have when you have three characters, three main Rangers to begin with, you would think you would develop more of the characters and their personalities. We learn a lot about their backstory and people who are involved with them, such as the Red Ranger's sister or the Blue Ranger's friend who goes into engineering. We learn about their resolve through their friends and family members. But I just can't think of an instance where we really learned about them and where they made significant changes in their character. That's why it just kind of bothers me in that regard. But for what we got, I mean, the characters were good. They were moral. They did the right thing, and you know they're making choices out there, and they are making the good choices, I think. Something that does bother me, and I will bring up a specific issue in terms to how they're not learning anything. There was an episode where they had basically a mechanic who was working on Buster Ace. He screwed up. The Red Ranger got mad at him, and the Red Ranger had to learn a lesson about teamwork, that it's not just them, it's like everybody else in the facility is helping them to fight the Vargas to save the world and all that, and he has to kind of like soften up for that, which I thought was a very odd episode to begin with, because I don't necessarily see a kid who's 18, 19, maybe 20 years old reacting to that way exactly. I don't think that was a good episode overall, but he learned something, but I'm not saying that it completely changed his character, which a lot of these shows, because it's only 1 year, that does lack. It doesn't completely change their character. Their arcs are much smaller and usually refined to one episode. Not to say that they don't carry those things over. it just seems to me that they didn't learn as much as they potentially could have. All right, let's get back on track right here. I want to go ahead and talk about Yoko, the Yellow Ranger, and that's the easiest name that I can, well, the second easiest name I can pronounce. So in the tradition of many other shows, she is the youngest. I think she's 16, 17. She's of high school age, and instead of being in high school, she's working on these missions and stuff like that, which is kind of odd to me. And I like her ending in the series is she ends up going to high school. That's her big thing at the end, is getting to high school and have a normal life and all that. And I just keep thinking, like, so she's there and all the girls talk about what they did on Friday night with what boys and did you go to the game and whatnot. And they ask, what'd you do, Yoko? Oh, I just saved the world from an evil computer program. What did you do? I mean, it's kind of funny, I guess, but yeah, it's very mundane, her ending, but the rest of the characters do kind of get mundane endings, which I think is almost appropriate. Um, but they really do play up with her naivete, her childlike innocence. I mean, there are times where she can take control and be serious and all that, but I don't think her character is meant to be taken too seriously because, one, she's a rabbit, which is a funny kind of animal when you think about it to begin with. She is young, she is cute. Her temper really flares a lot. I hate to say she's like a typical woman, but she's more like a typical teenage girl. Let me put it that way, so I don't offend as many people. But she does have those things where she does get annoyed with the Blue Ranger, who is almost her surrogate father, I would go ahead and say, and does get annoyed at her buddy Royd, the rabbit, basically. Which I will say is Roger Rabbit, hilarious, love it. But she does have these kind of mood swings, but she doesn't have the overall character arc. I was actually glad they didn't really give her any type of love triangle or love story or anything like that. I mean, I think they may have had like one character she was interested in throughout the series, but it wasn't like an ongoing thing that, because for high school girls, at least how they're portrayed in media, it's like it's all about the boys and stuff like that. But for her, it was something more. It was protecting the world. She also, she didn't like going to school and stuff. I don't think they ever brought up shopping as a thing. So she's not stereotypical, but she's understandable. She is a real character as opposed to an archetype, I would say. And I liked her. Nothing particularly offensive, but also nothing particularly interesting about her compared to other female heroines. She's not like Luca. She's not very brazen or anything like that. She's not like, who am I thinking? She's not like, the whole point I'm trying to say is that she does have less of a personality, but she's a character you can quickly identify because she is the young high school girl, but doesn't have all those Bella Swan type traits, I guess. Now, before I get into the Nether Rangers, let's look at the command crew they have, because I really did like this command crew that they had in the base. They had the big boss and the two subordinates, the girl and the guy, and I can't remember their names. I should have wrote those down. I apologize. The only problem I have is I wish they were a more integral part to the story. Because the commander, he's just there to shout out, go here, do this, maybe we should do that. He kind of has a relationship with Beatbuster Jin, but it's never really expanded upon. It's never really talked about too much. But he's just there to give exposition and send them on missions and things like that. I wish there was more they could do with his character. I know in the Go Buster versus Go Buster movie, in the alternate reality, he becomes the Black Ranger, which I kind of would have liked to seen something like that happen. I always love it when mentors get involved in the battle because usually they're the best fighters and the best characters. I mean, I like when Kruger got involved there, Tommy, of course, in Dino Thunder, and now Torin and Kyoryuger. Anytime a mentor is involved in fighting like that, I always enjoy it when they become Rangers, and it's always a lot of fun. I wish that was something that could have happened. The two subordinates, I thought, again, more could be done with them. They were involved in a couple of plots, typically decoys or running certain missions, but if they could have used them, gotten to know their characters a little bit more. I mean, my wife liked that one guy. I don't know why. Maybe because she said something about his hair. I'm not quite sure and all that. But she thought he was cute, and she was wondering if he was going to come back and do anything. I was like, no, not really. He's just kind of there, I'm afraid. And she got disappointed. And the weird thing is, I almost thought the series was going to be done from that one girl's point of view, because the first episode, not only is it the first time the Go Busters really get together and join forces and whatnot and stuff, but it's that girl's first day working for them. So I almost kind of thought the series might be told from her perspective, from the first day of the job to everything ends, and she would give commentary on the situation or something. Maybe I was asking for a little bit too much, but it was kind of odd they would introduce her character, because I thought her character was going to be like an avatar for the audience, where you get that exposition, we learn with her, but we would follow her a bit. And that just didn't happen. She was kind of relegated to the background. I do like throughout the series, like on her desk, more and more little toy stuffed animals would start appearing and whatnot. I know a lot of women who are like that, basically. But I mean, they were okay for the roles they served. They were good. I just wish that they would become more involved with the plots, and we learned more about them and their motivations. And again, they were featured in some episodes, but not to the extent the other characters were. So again, that's something that did kind of bother me. The Bunny Roids were all kind of interesting. The thing about it that kind of bothers me is that I like how each of them is loyal to their human counterpart. Gorseki is loyal to Blue, Cheetah Neck is loyal to Red, and the rabbit, whose name eludes me at the moment, is loyal to the Yellow Ranger. They're there to help them. And it's not so much a servant's attitude, but it is some sort of loyalty they have to them, being with them for the last 13 years, because that's something they do make a point of, is that these Bellroids have been their best friends for the entire period since their parents disappeared. And I wish more could have been done with those relationships. Yeah, they did some episodes on that, and really what's as the Go Buster versus Go Kaiger movie went into those relationships a little bit more. I wish that was kind of played throughout the series more, because it's always them worrying about the Rangers. It's never the Rangers worrying about them, except when the rabbit was kidnapped one time, and that's a completely different thing altogether. But I wish that there was more interplay between their relationships. And then what do the other characters think? I mean, when Gorseki's in a conversation with Yoko, what do they talk about? Do they just talk about their counterparts, or do they, actually have conversations about something? Because we do find out in the Go Buster versus Go Buster movie that the Bellroids do have souls. They are alive. They are living beings. So I would like to, with that revelation, I would have liked to have known more about their characters, their hopes, their wants, and all that. Because, what does all this really matter to them, I guess? I mean, yeah, they're going to be loyal to their masters and all that, but where does that loyalty come from? Is it because they are programmed? Do they indeed have those strong bonds there? Because, again, they have souls, so I imagine they're going to have emotions. So, that's just kind of what I was a little worried about. Again, they didn't go to too much detail except in the movie and all that. And unfortunately, the movie got so far away from the actual crossover, it was kind of funny in a way. But I liked them. Another major issue I kind of had is that, okay, so Chia Nick turns into a motorcycle. Why doesn't Gorseki and the rabbit turn into any type of vehicle? Because, when I first saw the toys in Chia Nick, basically it was a car that turns into a cheetah, that turns into a robot, and then can combine with the Megazord, and of course the little robot comes in there who's necessary to pilot it, and becomes a motorcycle. So my immediate thought is like each ranger is going to get their own Zord that's a vehicle, turns into an animal, turns into a robot, and their own little Bellroid who's going to be their own personal transportation, whether it's a motorcycle, go-kart, jetpack, whatever. That was kind of my thought. But then we go into it, and I was really disappointed only the ranger gets the cool motorcycle. Really? And then the other guys have to travel around in an SUV. That was kind of bothersome for me. I wish that was done differently. Maybe a little bit more development time could have done that because I just find it unfair that the Red Ranger gets the motorcycle and nobody else gets Jack. That's just the personal problem I have. But other than that, not that big of a deal. So now we have two other characters. We have Stagbuster and Beatbuster, Jay and Jen. Now the weird here's the weird thing about it. So Jin is the human, and he 13 years ago, like the others, was transported into the subdimension. But he's able to communicate through an avatar system. Now this is the same type of system that Enter and Escape, the two villains, which I will talk about eventually, do. They're able to project themselves from the subdimension into the human world, basically as digital copies, not necessarily as real people. Enter and Escape are pure data, so they're just projecting from the subdimension in that regard. But Jin is a real person, and he's projecting his physical body onto the real world while he's basically unconscious in stasis in a way. Um, the Avatar thing is a little confusing to me in some aspects because it is explained, but isn't explained as far as okay. Well, I mean, here's my point. So Jin, his whole thing is he has this avatar, and he's supposed to be like 40 years old, but he looks like he did when he was 13 years prior, basically. And it's the big mystery: what's going on with him and stuff? Weren't you in the subdimension? All this, but it's revealed he's just a digital copy. If that is the case, I mean, this isn't like James Cameron's Avatar. This is projecting data. Then why is it such a bother if he was to get attacked or hurt or even die? Because they treat him like they would any other person. But consider the doctor from Voyager, who's able to project himself but really can't be killed, can't really be harmed by particle weapons and things of that nature. But Jin can. So what is it about the avatar system that basically says you can destroy the avatar and that destroys the person as well? It would almost seem to me it wouldn't be effective because think of when you play a game like Warcraft or you play Second Life or anything like that. It's almost the same concept, at least the way I view it, is you're taking your digital persona, place it into this world which you can't yourself get to, and doing all these actions. And what happens if you die? Well, you restart the game from where you left off and you continue on, basically. So why doesn't Jin do that? I don't understand why it's such a big deal. Yeah, it adds for drama and everything, but if he's a digital copy, why did you give him that weakness, basically? And it doesn't seem like that's a weakness for Enter or Escape, because it does seem... Now, they kind of retcon this a little bit towards the end, but it was always my idea that they are just projections for somebody on the other side so they can move around. And if you destroyed Enter or Escape, it's not any great loss. It's just they got to take time to make a new avatar to go ahead and come back. Again, at the end of the series, that's kind of retconned a little bit with what's happening to Escape and what's going on with the Messiah cards, and I'll get into that here later. I'm going to save the villains for later because I really want to talk a lot about them. It is kind of confusing in that regard because it just is. They're just not really explained. Maybe I'm missing something there, but that would just kind of bother me about Jin. But Jin as a character overall is kind of interesting. I always like the self-proclaimed geniuses who really are geniuses and just like, hey, I'm a genius. Don't worry about it. Those characters are always a lot of fun. I thought he was fun here. Now, the guy who plays him was Magi Yellow over in Magi Ranger. Now, I did not actually see Magi Ranger. I did see Bokanger versus Super Sentai, in which he made an appearance. I didn't know that was the same character, so I was really surprised until I was told that. But, from what I was seeing and all that, he was a good actor, good character. I like the character, somebody who is cocky and sure of himself and all that. That's not the Red Ranger, that is the Gold Ranger and all that. But, of course, they always have to do that thing where, yeah, I'm part of the team, I'm not really part of the team, but yes, I am part of the team. They always do that every season. And I really like that. Something about his character that I really do wish that they could have done more is it in a couple of flashback scenes he talks about Yoko's mother and how wonderful she was and everything. And it just seemed to me that there was a relationship between Jin and Yoko. And I almost wonder if Jin is Yoko's father. I know it's complete, as Professor Morgan would say, that's called wuss, wild and founded speculation. Ah, yes, I quoted you, Professor Morgan. Um, but it just seems like they were going to establish that they had some sort of romantic chemistry, and that Jin was almost looking after Yoko. There was one particular episode where they were finding escape, and they were using the prototypes for their Bowlizer armor. And he was really trying to go ahead and protect her and stuff, and he was having flashbacks about the mother and all that. And I would have just liked to have seen, I was in love with your mother, and if the story was like, it was because of me she was over there, it was because of me she was put in danger, I want her to come that night because I was wanting to see her and stuff like that, it's all my fault that you're in this situation. That would have been a good backstory. I think that would have been great if there was a pre-established relationship, because what it sounds like to me is they were trying to do is that there is this is my destiny kind of thing, because my parents did this, the sin of the children, and the children must make up for the sin of the parents. That's what I thought we were kind of going to get in the beginning. And when they brought in this thing with Jin and Yoko's mother, I was just like, okay, so let's see where this goes from there. But really, a couple of episodes later, they really just kind of forget about it. He still has this longing for the mother and all that. And even when they go to the subdimension to fight Messiah, her program is up there, but he doesn't really interact with her and stuff. It just seems like it was wasted potential. There was something they could have done with that character, with that backstory, but they didn't capitalize on it. I'm really disappointed about that. Because, geez, if he was Yoko's mother, how cool would that be? What kind of story potentials would you have for the father who was never there because he didn't want to be and then he couldn't be? Um, that would have been really good. But that's just me rewriting the series. But I really thought that was kind of the direction they were going to go, or at least something similar in that direction. So I'm really upset that we didn't get anything close to that, basically. So now next is Stagbuster, Jay, and he's a buddy roid, except now this is what bothers me about Go Buster, and this happens frequently within a lot of the Sentais, is that you have a predetermined set of rules where everything's kind of like organized neatly into boxes. And then something comes along which kind of like throws that out of proportion. And let me give you an example. Like, okay, so in Power Rangers, when we first started, they were just colors: red, blue, green, yellow, black, white, all that stuff. And then along the line, we got characters like Magna Defender, Phantom Ranger, Titanium Ranger, Quantum Ranger, Crimson Thunder. You have all these Rangers that don't fit into those prearranged boxes. And it's really hard to classify them and get a certain pattern down. Because for a while, you do have certain patterns that start to emerge. What Jay does is similar to, kind of what I'm talking about. And here's what I mean. Each Ranger has a Buddy Roid. Each Buddy Roid is necessary in order to pilot that Zord. And without that Buddy Roid, the Zord can't be piloted. And as we find out throughout later in the series, the Buddy Roids can actually pilot the Zords by themselves, which makes me wonder why the Rangers are even necessary, but that's a discussion for another time. Jay himself becomes a Ranger. Now, the way it's described, and it's not really described in the series, but in like extra materials and from what I was telling people, is that basically Jay's golden armor becomes the Ranger suit for Jin, and under his golden armor is a Ranger form. That the Ranger form is his true form and not his Buddy Roid mechanical form. And further, neither Jay nor Jin need Buddy Roids to pilot their Zords, which are separate from the Power Ranger Zords, or the Go Buster Zords, excuse me. So why did you introduce the concept of the Buddy Roids if with the next two Rangers, you're going to completely abandon that concept to come up with something new. And I know it's usually it's part of the series. It's a necessary evil, basically. But, I mean, look at Kyoryuger, for example. What I like about Kyoryuger is each ranger has their own battery, has their own Zord to go ahead and pilot. It's even, it makes sense, and everybody's kind of equal in that regard. But Jay and Jin, they break the mold. And while that is good at times, there is no pattern. It seems very chaotic to me. And that's a little bothersome. I know I'm nitpicking on this little point right there, but I do find it odd that basically, up until, again, the final few episodes, Jay is the only Butteroid that fights. And that's something that also bothers me when we look back at the Butteroids, is that Cheetah Nick can fight. He's got like a wheel gun, basically, in which he can fight. Jay can go ahead and fight whether he's morphed or not. Goroseki, despite being a giant gorilla robot, doesn't fight, and the rabbit can't do anything. He's like just on wheels. He can't really do anything. So I find it odd that the Gold Rangers and the Red Rangers Butteroids can fight in battle. One can become a ranger, and yet the other two Butteroids don't do jack, basically. And Jay doesn't even turn into a vehicle. So it seems like they keep changing the rules in a way, or it's at least in a state of flux. And again, how is it that, again, if it's true what they're saying, and again, please tell me if this is inaccurate or something, but because we see the golden pieces fly off of Jay and go on to Jin to become his ranger suit, why would he be a ranger underneath? And then if he is a ranger underneath, what happens when he takes off the helmet? Or is that his head? And furthermore, when he dies, why is he not in his true form and the basically morphed form? It's almost backwards. I don't know. It really kind of confuses me. I like the character. Although the whole stop blocking me thing, that got annoying pretty quick. I didn't particularly appreciate that. And I don't get his whole thing about give me Intron, keep giving me stuff to drink. That really kind of bothered me because I was like, so are you constantly running on empty or something like that? Or I don't know. It was just kind of weird. But for a Gold and Silver Ranger, good designs. That was kind of interesting. I really like their Zords, except I don't understand why they turn into bugs all of like 2 or 3 episodes and then never turn into bugs again. But that's true of any series. Like, yeah, we introduced this alternate form or this animal form, but we're always going to be in Megazord form. That's something that always kind of bothered me. Now, there were a couple of characters that did pop into the series. One was kind of unwelcomed and one was kind of bizarre, and they're just 2 unique cases that I really want to go ahead and talk about in regards to what they were doing within the series. First, let's go ahead and talk about Buster Pink, or Pink Buster. Now, the weird thing about Pink Buster is she shows up as like a character in an episode while they're chasing down the Messiah cards. And Pink Buster basically is a thief, and she thinks of herself as kind of a modern-day Robin Hood. I only steal from rich people. Yet she doesn't give it to poor people. So she's kind of a thief with a conscience, in a way. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then she takes on the moniker of a Pink Buster. I'm not sure why, exactly. She doesn't even have a suit. She just has like a black leather outfit with pink hair, which you're going to get caught with that, and glasses. And basically they introduce her in one episode. She's got to help out the Rangers or the Busters. And then at the end of the episode, she leaves a note for the Red Ranger saying that I will be back because I have one last thing to steal, and that is your heart. Which is kind of cheesy and fun. I admit that I laughed when she said that. So it occurred to me when I had seen this episode, she appeared in like episode 40 or 41 or something, like 10 episodes from the end. And it was like, okay, she's going to come back. Is she going to play a major role in the series from this point? Is she going to be one of those extra characters? Is she really going to be a Go-Buster now and join the team? Well, that is the only time she appeared in the series. Now, yes, she appeared in the Go-Buster versus Go-Buster movie, but that wasn't even her. It was just the concept of the character. But this character was introduced for no reason, really, except for giving a love relationship for the Red Ranger, which never paid off. And I don't know why it wouldn't have paid off, why they didn't bring her back, and why she decided to make a connection to the Go Busters. Because if there's an explanation episode, I missed it. And I saw the episode like last week. So I don't know what that whole thing was about. I mean, I just find it interesting that there's a lot of fan art out there I've seen, and she's been a lot, and some people are actually counting her as like a false Pink Ranger, almost in the same vein as Abare Pink, or her like being officially part of a team. I mean, there's this guy in DeviantArt has this great picture of every Sentai Ranger, and she's included in that picture. And I'm just like, because when I saw the picture before I had seen Go Buster, I was like, okay, so she's going to play a major role somewhere down the series. But again, 40 episodes in, I didn't see her. I see her. She's in one episode, then she leaves, never mentioned again. She's almost like Dika Gold in the fact that she appears once, and there is something important about her and her relationship to the Red Ranger, but that relationship is never really mentioned again because it's not important outside the episode that she appeared in. So I don't know what they were thinking with doing this, and I mean, because you can still have, because in Geiki Ranger they did something similar. They had 3 different thieves. I think it was Cherry and they were all named after different fruits or flowers. But one of them fell in love with Geiki Blue, and then she had to go ahead and leave and disappear. But we never saw her again because she wasn't. She was just a regular thief. She wasn't pretending to be a Geiki Ranger. I mean, she was trying to be Geiki Pink or something like that. Then I think you should bring her back in. So why address her as the Pink Buster or Buster Pink, but then just leave her out of the series if you weren't going to develop her in any significant way? It almost seems like they had a plan, but they kind of abandoned it at the last moment. I don't know why. That's just an oddity about this show that I wanted to go ahead and kind of point out. I don't understand it, but maybe there was something more to that. And then there was the 2-episode crossover with Space Sheriff Gavin. Now here's the thing. I've never seen the series Gavin. I had not seen Gokaiger versus Gavin. But he basically he and his assistant and a monster invade 2 episodes of the series. And basically, here's the thing. They introduce the character, but they don't explain any of his backstory. They don't explain his motivations. And here's the thing. When I was my understanding of Gavin was that he was the same guy that played back in like Battle Fever J and Denzi Man. He was one of the very old Sentai guys. And then after he got done Sentai, he came with the show. It was very popular. Lasted a lot of time through the 80s. And they were reviving the show with the same actor. So to my surprise, it's this young guy and this girl who's dressed like a robot. They just introduce the characters. They expect us to know who these characters are. And in addition to that, understand their plot, motivation, and character traits. Now there's a difference between when the Power Rangers brought in the Ninja Turtles. Because here's the thing. The Ninja Turtles are a cultural, and in some cases a world phenomenon that you can look at and like, oh, Michelangelo, Donatello, Leonardo, Raphael. You understand those characters. So to bring in the Ninja Turtles without very much backstory makes sense, because it's like if you bring Superman into your story. People know who Superman is. You really don't need any backstory unless it's a radically different realization of that character. Like if Superman was Red Sun, Superman Red Sun, completely different realization of that character. So they bring in these Gavin characters, and I don't know who any of the people are. They don't make an attempt to explain who these people are, what their origins are, or what they're really doing there, and what that's supposed to mean to us. Now, I'm sure if you're a Japanese guy or girl, and you watch the show, oh, Gavin, I like that show. I've seen that. Well, yeah, that's great for the Japanese, but for the international audience, a little backstory, I think, is needed. And if this was like one of those backdoor pilots for a new show, or if it's one of those shows like trying to get what audience to watch this sister show, like what they did with Next Gen and DS9 a couple of times, then you need to really give us a reason to watch Gavin. Why do I want to watch Gavin? What is interesting about him? There isn't anything really interesting. Again, he just invades the show for 2 episodes. We don't learn anything about him. And apparently he has this dragon robot spaceship the entire time, and we only see it like once in the 2 episodes. Maybe if you introduced that a little bit earlier, I would be interested in it. And I don't know. There was just something bothersome about his appearance. Didn't really do anything. Didn't explain anything, at least to my satisfaction. Because why do I care about this character? He's just another character. You could have replaced him with anybody else, made up a hero, and you wouldn't have lost anything with the story. You have to do something more. You got to make us care about this character. Not so much what effect does he have on the Rangers, but what effect does the audience have on him? What do we take away from his character? So, again, it bothered me, and I just wanted to point that out. I don't think those are 2 episodes that should have been in there. They could have been reserved for more character building development or a more interesting story. Because when you got an extra hour to do stories, 45 minutes to an hour, there's a ton you can go ahead and do. So I wonder if this was contractually obligated. And at least when Shinkanger crossed over with Kamen Rider, they went over to their show, and it didn't interfere with anything that was going on in Super Sentai. Okay? And that I thought was a little bit better, because here's the thing. If the Go Busters went over to Gavin's show, then that means I have to go back to the 1980s, and I have to watch all the Gavin episodes, and I have to understand his character, and I get this reference, I get that reference. And I'm sorry, I don't want to be doing all that homework, because I'm doing enough homework on all the Sentai shows at the moment. So you either need to introduce a character that everybody knows, like Godzilla or somebody, or put a new character in that we can learn about, or give us enough backstory to where, this is all I need to know about that character. I don't need to go watch 100 plus episodes of his show to understand this reference or what's going on, basically. Well, that's my little rant about Gavin and all that. Let me go ahead and talk about the villains quickly. It seems to me that they were just going to do Enter, and then they decided to give him a female counterpart later in the series. For some time, I thought they were going to go the route of Rio and Melee from Geki Ranger, which I thought would be great, because I did love those characters. I loved what they did with those characters. They didn't necessarily do that here with Enter and Escape, which was okay, but they did a lot with Enter. Because, okay, so the beginning of the show, we have Messiah, who's the evil Zordon, basically, or as I described much earlier in the video, Kilo Khan. And then enters the Malcolm Frink. He is an avatar created by Messiah from somewhere in the subdimension, who is taking this human form to interact in the human world and carry out Messiah's bidding. He does not have a human counterpart. He is just a collection of data from the subdimension, particularly made up from the memories of the Buster's parents and the people in the research division, basically. Such as the reason he speaks French is because one of the guys was French, I think is what it was. And like Escape has 2 guns, which he calls Gog and Magog, which is based off of the Red Ranger's mother's 2 dogs from when they were children, basically Gog and Magog. So, it's kind of interesting. It's made up of data, but they're not real people. Again, they are just these avatars made of nothing, basically. And, I found Enter to be very entertaining. He was a very serious villain, but he didn't take himself that seriously too much. He was just casually strolling by and looked at the Go Busters more as bugs more than anything. It's like, I'll deal with you guys tomorrow. I don't feel like it and stuff. And the thing is about Enter is that he didn't necessarily seem to be the most trustworthy person. And by that, what I mean is, every time you talk about Messiah, I always felt like he was working his own agenda. Now, we eventually learned that was the case. That when they did the Messiah card thing, that he was kind of working his own agenda to become the new Messiah. But it always seemed to me at the beginning he did have this ambition to be greater than Messiah, to turn on him at some point. That's kind of what I understood from it. Yeah, he wanted to help him, but it almost seemed like it was to help to his own ends, basically. Which, I guess as an artificial creation, I wonder why he would have that in his mind to want to betray Messiah or take over. And then we got Escape later on, who, if I remember correctly, she was like programmed to be more loyal, and she is loyal. She is loyal to the end, to Messiah. And her whole thing that's really interesting. First, beautiful actress they got to play her. I thought she was really good looking. um, and she definitely plays evil well. I mean, she's nowhere close as Melee, I think, in both of beauty and probably acting talent and all that. But she was really bloodthirsty, it seemed. All she wanted to do was shoot and destroy and kill, not necessarily for a goal, just like Messiah said, go over there and cause havoc, and that's basically what she did. Oh, and I love the idea how Escape has. Okay, so Enter has like a laptop he uses to create monsters. Escape has an iPad. That's clever. I like that because I almost thought that Escape was going to take over as the villain of the series, but that wasn't the case. They really did kind of work in tandem with each other, and that was okay. But I wanted to see more of her, definitely. But we don't get too much of their personalities in there. They are stock in a way, but I do appreciate that they're human and not somebody in costume because I have a problem with that in a lot of the series. I think the shows that have human villains in Sentai are always better than the costume villains. I mean, yeah, you can have a mix in there, but if your main protagonist is an actual person, I just find that a lot more interesting. There's always a lot more you can go ahead and do with that. The only thing I would say is towards the end, the villains did get Saturday morning cartoonish in a way. Because Enter's whole thing was just about becoming a new Messiah and becoming a god, basically. Pretty generic, no real motivation for it and stuff. And he learns to copy the Go Buster's powers. He becomes the Dark Buster and all that kind of stuff. So it was okay. I just wish there was more motivation behind it. I wish there was more complex character story because that's the thing with, like, again, I keep saying this as a great example. Rio and Melee, great character dynamic with them. You have a motivated backstory for Rio, and you feel bad for him when he eventually dies. So, but you don't feel that way for Enter. Now, I kind of feel bad for Escape because what they eventually did, which I both like and I didn't like, is that basically she was killed, and then Enter had created a copy of her from backup data, but it was backup data from before she was introduced in the series, before she met the Go Busters. So basically, she'd do her opening spiel like, "Are they any good?" Blah blah blah, and all that stuff. And that was her thing too. She always wanted to live up to Papa Messiah's standards. Like, did I do good? Was I good enough for you? And stuff like that. And Escape was completely loyal. But she was killed, and Enter kept making copies of her. She would die, bring her back to life, but she was now obedient to Enter, who was now basically merged with Messiah. That was his end game, was to merge with Messiah data and become Messiah, basically. So they would, she would keep dying, bringing her back. She'd be more powerful. He would use her to ends. And the thing is that I didn't like this because it wasn't the same character. Basically, it was the same actress playing 6 or 7 different characters. Because there was this whole thing about her rivalry with the Blue Ranger, like, you are good, but I'm better kind of thing, and they would be fighting at every encounter, which is kind of odd. I don't recall the last time that a female villain was fighting a male villain that was not the Red Ranger or essentially a love interest or anything. So I did like that. But once once Messiah deleted her, then we didn't see that rivalry anymore. We didn't see that connection she had to the Blue Ranger. The closest you get is at the end, when she dies for the last time, she's not coming back. She asks, "Papa, was I any good?" And the Blue Ranger basically looks over her as she's dying and says, "Yes, you were." And then she dies happy, apparently. That doesn't mean anything to her character anymore because it's not her. It's a different character. The person that line belongs to died 4 or 5 episodes earlier. The Blue Ranger, I appreciate him saying that, because he knows even for a villain, she's being treated horribly just to be a copy and not a real person anymore, I guess. Um, it was kind of bothersome, I'll have to go ahead and say. I didn't like what they did there. I really wanted to see a natural conclusion to the Blue Ranger and Escape rivalry. We didn't get that, and that was very, very disappointing. And I wish there was an opportunity to go back and change it somehow. I mean, they're going to bring her back in the Go Buster versus Kyoryuger movie. It's probably going to be the same thing. It's the backup data. She's not going to know who any of these people are. So, yeah, it's one of those things, but what can you do about it now? And then, of course, there's Messiah, the last villain I want to go ahead and talk about. I really want to know more about him. I know he's just a computer program. I want to know these fits of anger that he's having. I always thought that he was like the Wizard of Oz in a way. Like, don't look behind the curtain. That there was something else going on to what he was. But that wasn't the case. He was straight up evil. He was a computer program. He was taken out more than halfway through the series and all that. And, there was more they could have done with it and stuff. And, yeah, I guess all I have to say about him is like I really wanted to see more. I wanted it to be Messiah, not Enter, be the main bad guy and all that. But again, that's just me rewriting the story. I just enjoyed his character a little bit more. So the last thing I want to go ahead and talk about before we get out of here, I know I've been prattling on for who knows how long at this point. But let me just kind of talk about the overall tone of the series and just a couple of major points throughout the show. Because as I said, it started out very good. It started out different from every Sentai that I'd seen before. Because it started out where, first of all, the Megazord needed time to be formed together. They actually explained why the monster couldn't attack while the Megazord was forming is because it needed a shield around it to protect it. And the monster couldn't get through while it was forming. That's brilliant. I have never seen that in another show before. That's the best way of explaining to people who are like, oh, well, why does the monster just sit and wait by while they transform? Well, now we have an answer. There's a shield around it, and they can't get through the shield, basically. So I thought that was great. And even I liked the villains because they didn't give them personalities. Every Sentai series has given the villains some sort of personality. So, like they'd be funny, they'd be cocky, they'd be drunk, they'd be whatever and stuff. In this show, what they did is they took an inanimate object, turned it into a robot, and they would fight the robot. But the robot wasn't a personality, it was just a robot, is what it was. But then they would use that technology they acquired, whether it was like a pizza cutter or a cannon or a radio tower, whatever it was, and use that as an add-on attachment for the actual giant robot, the Megazord, which would be transported in. So this series did not have the robot got larger and became a giant monster. It completely threw that trope away. It was now two different threats you had to deal with. Sometimes you'd have hours to prepare for the next one, or sometimes it would just be minutes, and then you would have two monsters on your hand to fight. And again, no personality with these monsters, which was great. Unfortunately, somewhere down the line, somebody looked at the show and said, this is too dark, this is not enough fun, so let's go change it and make it less fun. So towards the end, there were a couple monsters that did have personalities, that did become jokey. And actually, I don't even think it was probably about halfway, maybe a little bit before halfway. So you got like the eraser monster, and then there's the tofu monster, which is pretty much the same thing and all that. And then there's the radio tower one, who was actually... Which actually reminds me, real quick, episode 39, when the Messiah thing sends that jet to capture the boat and the 747 out of the sky and turns into Data, did they ever explain what happened to the people? Did those people die? Did they become digitized and die? Because I'm sorry, every Sentai show I've seen is like when something like that happens, you always say at the end that they've all escaped and they go on to their normal lives. That did not happen in this episode. I was really bothered by that. I was like, so you just killed a whole plane full of people and a whole boat full of people, and yet you didn't show them coming back. So are they dead? And if they're dead, how come the characters don't have any remorse? How come there's no mourning? How come there's no consequences from that. Not to mention, I guarantee you on that plane there were some children on there. So the Rangers have to deal with child deaths. How come that was not addressed in the series? You can't just make a whole airplane disappear and say, oh, there was nobody on that plane. BS. No, you can't do that. I'm really upset about that. So anyway, back to the robots. So yeah, they gave them personalities later on. Really annoying. I did not like that at all. I was like, because they started changing things. Because eventually, the shield concept would not be brought up again. The monsters would have personalities and all that. And of course, it seems like the big issue is like so many Megazords at once is a problem. But when they go to the subdimensions, like they got through 14 of them with no problem. And actually, let me talk about them going to the subdimension, because halfway through the series, they go into the subdimension. And this is where I talk about they learn to let go, basically. And what it was that they go to subdimension hoping to find their parents. They go in there, they find the parents are Data, that they are all but dead, basically. And the only way to destroy Messiah is to kill them. That was a great episode because the Go Busters had to make a very, very hard choice that I don't think I could make in that position. But they thought about the situation and realized they had to do it. They pretty much had to kill their own parents to save the world. Other than Luke and Vader, I can't think of another time they would have to do that. Anybody would have to do that, let alone on Sentai or Power Rangers. I mean, that is just, wow. And that's what I talk about. They had to learn to let go. That their whole vengeance was like, I can find them again, but then they find them and they can't be with them, and they have to kill them to save the world. I mean, oh my goodness, that was such a great episode. And that really looked like the series finale when you think about it. I mean, it's like halfway through, it's like, wait a second, we got 20 more episodes to go. What the heck is going on? It was really good. I liked it. But I will say this about the subdimension real quick. 2 instances they traveled to the subdimension in Go Buster, because it's portrayed in cutaways as this dark, desolate, red, purplish sky. It's a barren wasteland. Yet every time that the Go Busters go there, it becomes sunny and bright and full of plants and all this other kind of stuff. I always hated when they did that, because can you not put a filter on the screen? I don't care if they look purple. That's what you designed this subdimension to look like this barren wasteland. So why is it always sunny every time they go in there? They did that in the first episode, the halfway point, and did it in the final episode. We're going to the subdimension. Oh wow, look at this bright sunny day. That just really kind of bothered me. And then the series finale was pretty good. It seems like your standard fare, but a lot of cool action beats happen that don't typically happen in Sentai. And of course, the big thing at the end, and here's the thing, is the Rangers were having to make this choice. Well, not really make the choice, but in order to, basically what happened is that the Red Ranger got a Messiah card in him, which bonded with him essentially, meaning that he could not die because it was protecting him, and the only way to defeat Enter was to destroy the card by killing the Red Ranger. Interesting conflict and dilemma. So much so the Red Ranger was going to commit suicide on at least 2 different occasions, which is very gutsy to do in a series for your main hero, let alone somebody in his 20s, to consider committing suicide to defeat the enemy. I guarantee that's not going to be coming over in the Power Rangers adaptation. In any case, they come up with a plan to take it out of him, but it would end up killing Jin in the process. And there's this beautiful, touching scene where he's like, I'm willing to sacrifice myself. The Rangers are like, no, we can't do this. We have to find another way. And then Jin just loses it. He loses his effing mind. He goes off on the Rangers saying, where is your resolve? Where has that been? Because if you're willing to do anything, then let me sacrifice myself. And it was really good. I love that. And then Yoko's just crying, and he looks her in the eyes like, what about your mother? And that's where I was hoping, that whole mother thing would come back that I wanted to see, but it didn't. But just wow, just that whole thing was just amazing. I really liked that. And in the end, that he dies. He straight up dies. Um, I think the last time something like that happened had been in Abba Ranger, and I'm just like, wow, that was really good. So we only have three Rangers at the end, and of course Jay the Bellyroid, and you can tell, even though he's a machine, he has a soul, and he misses his friend, and that was his big concern through the whole thing. And he even has that Jenga piece, that black Jenga piece, as a necklace now. So it was really good. I thought it was great. The ending to it. But here's my overall point that I'm getting at. The series started out really good, but then they lightened the tone of it somewhere down the line, and I didn't like it. If it was like the first few episodes of the series where it was this dark, practical world, because here's the thing. The first few episodes, they were shooting in locations that typically would not be in normal Sentai shows. They were shooting in angles that would not be in normal Sentai shows. They were having plots that were not in normal Sentai shows. And then down the line, they really started getting into those things like, oh, we must protect this kid, or this kid has a secret to whatever and stuff. And it fell back into the formula too much. And that's what bothered me about it. I wanted it to stay dark. What if the series ended with the Red Ranger committing suicide? My goodness, how great would that have been? Not to say suicide is a great story thing, but I'm just saying, we've never seen that before. And that's the problem I had towards the end, is that we started seeing what we would normally see and we didn't see anything new. So, I guess that's the thing. I liked it. Again, of the Sentai I've seen, it's better than Ghost Ager, I would go ahead and say. Probably still not as good as Geiki Ranger, because I still think that's the best Sentai that I've personally seen. But yeah, it was good. I'm anticipating they're going to really dumb it down for Power Rangers, so we'll see what happens when we get there. I guarantee they won't follow the same plot. They'll make something completely new up. As to what that is, we'll go ahead and see. Because, it seems like this is almost like the red-haired stepchild of Sentai shows, because people didn't like the costumes because it meant pleather and, it was too dark and whatnot. And again, they tried to address that towards, halfway through the series. But I don't know. Here's the thing. I've rambled on for about an hour about what I thought about Go Busters and all that. I'd like to think I got all my thoughts out there. I've explained everything I liked about it, everything I didn't like about it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed these videos. Tell me what you think. Did you like Go Buster? Did you not like it? Do you like that they became lighter? Do you wish it was still dark? Guys, let me know. But I thank you for listening to me go on about this. Be expecting a similar video about this when Kyryuger ends. Oh, and by the way, look out, I will be doing a quick little video about Go Buster versus Go Buster. I have something interesting to say about that. So look for that, and that will basically include my thoughts on the Go Buster series. But again, thank you, have a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.